Hello there, Stewart. I see you're connecting to the audio. You'll want to unmute yourself when you have a chance.
Yeah.
Good to have you here. I'm so honored.
Oh, wait a second. Start video. There you go. There we are. Now you can see me.
Hi, good to
Hey,
see you. Good to
good to
see
see
you.
you.
Congratulations on this morning and everything. We're
Oh,
gonna go, I'm gonna, so please go ahead.
no, no, yeah, I just said thanks.
Oh,
Thanks a lot.
man, what a joy this is for all the reasons you know. This is amazing. And so I'm going to go first and we'll lock our meeting. That's make sure we don't have any issues. And then we're going to go to, I have to sign into live on Facebook,
Mhm.
and that will take us further. And let's see what else. I think I have to sign in a few more things. I wish I knew when this actually went live, but yeah, I think it goes live as we're preparing for this. So I always just
Yeah.
do my best to smile, but I have to type in a couple things here before we go forward. Yep, I have to do this. So here we go. Let's make sure I don't have too many typos. All right, we are making progress. Now we will be staying in the Zoom room. So I will go forward. We're going to go live, and then I'm going to go back into Zoom. Yes, back into the Zoom room. Here we go. We are now live on Facebook. Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Bill Doggett. I am a performing arts historian and a marketing agent for contemporary African American composers. And welcome to Beethoven at 250. It is my esteemed honor, truly my esteemed honor, to welcome you to a wonderful guest, one of the most distinguished pianists of our time, Mr. Stewart Goodyear. Stewart, welcome.
Such a pleasure.
Yes, and what a busy day and week you have had. My goodness. From the wonderful ceremony, which I was able to view this morning, in which you received the honorary fellow from your alma mater, the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto. And then not only that, but the broadcast yesterday by the Ann Arbor Symphony, and then this week at the Fourth Worth Symphony, showcasing the second piano concerto. My goodness, my goodness, what a week you have had. That's wonderful,
No,
wonderful.
it's been exciting to it's been a little surreal actually traveling again because this is my first it was my first flight um in a very, very, very long time, and working with musicians and playing for people, it just put on a different meaning now, a more intimate and more important meaning. So, I'm privileged um,
Hmm.
about this past week, this week, and the next week.
That's great. So, and you mentioned next week. So, what is coming up that
So,
you'd like to share?
a virtual chamber recital with some of the members of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. We'll be doing Ferdinand Rie's arrangement of the second movement of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. And I will also be playing the piano part of my piano quintet that I wrote in 2016. So this is actually the first time of myself performing this work. There were two other ensembles who performed it previously. So that is exciting. And then we end the program with the first quartet of Brahms.
Wow, wonderful. What, my gosh. And then, of course, there's so much that we have to talk about. I mean, not only are you a gifted pianist and Beethoven specialist, but you are also quite the composer. Not just chamber music, but I've recently been reading about your cello concerto. And of course, having studied cello as a private student at University of Southern California Music School before it was called the Coburn School, I'm of course interested in that and everything else you do. My goodness, I love it. I love it. So there is a lot to talk about, and we'll try to be as focused as we can. But I think for those of us, I mean, I know your background, but perhaps many in the audience, listening audience, do not. Please share with us your history from. I mean, my gosh, I relate to it as well, as you already know that. we both come as little kids in piano, but your story and your journey is particularly special. So please share that with us.
So I was born and raised in Toronto. My mother is from Trinidad, and she came over to Toronto. My mom and dad met at the University of Toronto, fell in love, and got married in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And I never knew my father because my father died of cancer 1 month before I was born. So it was just my mother and I.
Mm-hmm.
I started my journey as a classical musician at age 3. It was I was listening to my dad's record collection, and I came from a very eclectic musical background. In his collection, he had Jimi Hendrix, he had Cat Stevens,
Wow.
he had Herb Albert, and he had a whole bunch of various artists from the spectrum, as well as 2 boxes of symphonies, 1 box of Beethoven symphonies and the other box of Tchaikovsky symphonies. And so I was listening to those works, and that's when I knew I wanted to be a classical musician after hearing that, because that's where my heart lay, and I just loved what I was listening to, and life began hearing those works. And then my journey as a classical pianist began when I heard the box set devoted to the complete Beethoven piano sonatas. Vladimir Ashkenazy was the first pianist I heard, and previously I heard his recording of Chopin's 4 ballades. And then I just wanted to hear more of this pianist. And I was going to a record store in Toronto that is unfortunately no longer downtown or anywhere, Sam the Record Man, and coaxed my mom into buying this box set. And as soon as I came home, it was just like, opening up a box of chocolates and just devouring every flavor. It had that same kind of excitement, and every sonata was very different. But it made, and I was listening to it in chronological order. So, by the time I knew it, I went through the entire box set, listening to 13 LPs, and the day was over. But it was that day that changed my life.
That's amazing, and that's wonderful, and I can relate to that as well. As a little kid, I mean, there's so many interrelated stories between us, but I understand that because I had the same experience with a diverse taste in music, a little on the other end, the modern end. But I remember as an 11-year-old, way later after like your family situation, you lost your dad. You never knew your dad because he died before you were born. In my case, I lost my father when I was about 9.5, almost 10. He moved. He got another assignment in a different state, and then there were a whole bunch of other family things that came up. But the one thing that I can say about relating to your experience about going out, getting your mother to drive you, the same in my case. I was so fascinated, in particular, again, about structure and dealing with the history, the canon of works for solo piano. Of course, Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier has been considered by Hans von Bülow as the Old Testament and Beethoven as the New Testament. And then there was someone who showed up, very well known in his time, who basically created a work essentially for study for pianists that actually spoke to the legacy of the Well-Tempered Clavier, and that was Hindemith's Ludus Tonalis. And I heard that when I was 11 years old, and I was taken by that. And I insisted, like you with your mother, I insisted that my mother take me to the record store. I'd heard it on the radio, and I was just so fascinated because I think at that particular point I was very interested in structure, and I enjoyed this really unique, dynamic use of harmony and and counterpoint that is in Ludus Tonalis. And I thought to myself, that's not simply a work for students to study. That's actually a whole piece. I mean, that's a dynamic piece by itself. So I can relate to what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. But you went from being a 3-year-old and graduating from the Royal Conservatory in Toronto at 15. Then you went to Curtis. Tell us about that. Curtis and Juilliard.
Curtis was interesting. So it was my first year living in the States. And I was doing um, I was jumping back and forth between two worlds, it seemed. I was attending high school at the at a Quaker school, and
Mm-hmm.
going from there to having piano lessons and theory courses at the Curtis Institute of Music. And the atmospheres were like night and day, from the grunge period, Nine Inch Nails, Snoop Dogg just had his Doggy Style album out. Dr. Dre's The Chronic was right before. And being surrounded by these amazing sounds, from high school, and then going to an atmosphere where um, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms was what you heard. And both were vibrant atmospheres. And I learned so much from both of them and enriched my life from a pianist point of view and particularly from a composer's point of view.
Mm, interesting. And so that's at Curtis and Juilliard. Did you begin composing during this time or earlier?
So my first compositions were when I was 8 years old. I attended a choir school in Toronto, and my first compositions were motets that the choir
Wow.
sang Sunday Mass. And then I wanted to just devour as much information I could about orchestration, about writing for chamber music. So I was collecting scores and just studying Mozart symphonies, cantatas of Bach, and
Oh,
operas of Puccini. That's when I first began, and just wanting to just find out everything, what was idiomatic, and the ranges of different instruments. And I wanted very much, my passion lay in orchestra writing when I was around 10 and 11. So as a youngster, my aunt, and I had subscriptions to the Toronto Symphony, and every Saturday, that was one thing I always looked forward to. I was living north of Toronto, and it was a treat going downtown to hear the symphony play. I dressed, felt like $1,000,000, and
yeah,
heard various composers from Mussorgsky to Debussy, and every Saturday was, I felt like I was hearing a whole different range of sounds, and it made me even more passionate about being a classical musician and being a composer.
that's wonderful. And and I relate to that, of course. My parents were from Philadelphia, interestingly enough, in the 20s and 30s before my dad got an assignment on the West Coast at the end of World War II in San Francisco. But long and short is they moved down to Los Angeles, and I had a similar experience that you had in terms of this exposure and this interest. And um, probably this is news to you and certainly to everyone listening. I was not the musical prodigy that Stewart Goodyear is, but I was considered in my time as a 6-year-old and 7-year-old in piano, in preparatory at USC. Someone who was actually, my mother, a school teacher, was told to take me out at 6.5 years old, take me out of public school and put me into music school, an art school, because I was in eurythmics as a little kid first, which is dance movement for kids. And then I was in piano, and the two teachers told my mother, William, at that time, my name is William, although I go by Bill. William is got arts oozing all over him. So, but I'm grateful that your mom, and your aunt supported that. I was, the youngest son of a very prominent Methodist minister who was at that time huge in the early civil rights movement. I'm dating myself, obviously. But as much as I talked about this, I am grateful that there are others, and that's how we relate in some interesting ways about our early years. I wanted to learn every instrument in the orchestra. I remember saying this in my mother's Chrysler New Yorker, also dating myself. And they just took it as a little kid, saying this. But I was actually serious. I was very serious. So I'm so grateful that your family, your mom and your aunt were so engaging. And I had the similar experience going downtown, enjoying music. But then there's more to that story. But this is not about me. This is about you. So wow, I have just been so awed by listening to your stories in additional earlier interviews, and just the idea that it is possible, and that we, people like yourself and like myself and others who start early, even though we may have had challenges to be recognized, that we have carried forth. And I think that's part, we'll talk about a lot of that later, but I think that's just a wonderful part of who you are and who you bring to the everything you do. I think that's so important to bring the love, the gift, and the passion of being, engaged and being in love with what you are doing. I think is so important, really so important. So I really love it. So there is a lot we can talk about, but let us talk about Beethoven at 250. You are a Beethoven specialist, and you are the first African American, excuse me, first Black Canadian, Black person to record the Beethoven Piano Concerti as well as the sonatas. Please tell us about that.
Well, this was something that I just found out over the summer, which was a great shock to me. No one promoted that fact or even told me about, or even addressed that fact, or even told me that I was the first Black musician to have recorded all of the Beethoven sonatas and concerti. I do know that when I started to record the Beethoven, that was seen by a lot of people in the industry as an act of defiance, and I had absolutely no idea what they meant. I think to myself, what is so defiant about recording sonatas that have been recorded by artists in the past? And what is it about me playing Beethoven that is creating a feeling of animosity to some people? I never understood it. I remember there was a colleague in the classical world, as soon as who I thought was a supporter, when I showed her the release of my first volume of the Beethoven of the late sonatas, she looked at the cover and she says, "You're recording this?" And suddenly there was this very cold atmosphere. It's like I saw a different side of her, a side that I never thought I would ever see. And I came out of the meeting perplexed, to tell you the truth. And then I just thought, oh, well, I don't know what's going on. I just put it at the back of my mind. And then when I was recording the second volume, the producer I had at the time held the final edit
Right.
from the record company, and that I never understood either. And I was calling him because thankfully I save all of my emails. So I had the email saying that the final edit was ready, and then 2 months later, I was asking him again. It's like, oh, I still need to do some work on the edit. And then 6-7 months later, I didn't hear from the guy at all. And I was calling the record company, who couldn't believe what I was telling them, until the owner of the company called my ex-producer and told him, this is the email that you sent him. What on earth is going on? The next day, I got the final edit and the master. And I don't know if it was, I was hoping to goodness that this was a conspiracy, why they were holding this recording. But I no longer worked with that producer, and worked with another producer. And I said, you know what, instead of doing volumes, I'm just going to release the whole set. So now I'm going to do 6 CDs worth of sonatas in 1 month.
Wow.
And and everything went very smoothly. Edits and having the final say, and the master was prepared right away, and we released the box set a few months later. And it was going to be released the same time as my first Sonatathon. Now, the Sonatathon came about since I was around 3 or 4. I didn't think that I was going to be playing all of the sonatas, first of all, but I always thought of it in my mind as a complete set. I just felt like I was hearing this side of Beethoven that was very intimate, very vulnerable, and he had the courage to share every single part of himself in those sonatas. And it was like, you're spending time with this individual and you're seeing his or her many layers of who they are. And, their philosophy of life, their sense of humor and everything, just came forward in all of those sonatas. And I thought, well, if the day came that I had the privilege of doing recitals, I would have loved to have included at that time a Beethoven sonata, but there was something, I don't know, there was some hesitancy because I'm thinking to myself, which sonata do I program? Which aspect of Beethoven do I showcase in a 2-hour program? And I just couldn't do it. So I programmed Mozart, I programmed other composers. And then I just thought, all right, enough of this. I'm just going to play it the way I first heard it and share that with whoever wants to listen. So my first cycle was not one day. It was over the span of 5 days. And it was, and I had my opportunity of performing all of the sonatas at Ottawa Chamber Fest. Mm. And then the next year in Toronto, I presented my Sonatathon with the help of the Royal Conservatory and Koerner Hall. When it was announced that I was doing the Sonatathon, there was a lot of negative backlash from critics and bloggers saying, who is this guy? Is he a stuntman? What is he trying to prove? That was the question I was asked a lot. Not even before the Sonatathon. What are you trying to prove? And looking at my concert life beforehand and just being reminded of what orchestras and recital organizations would ask for and expect me to play, there was a lot, and I'm not saying there's anything at all wrong with this. I love every composer from every country, and I love performing all of them, but they wanted to stick me in a box. And that box, for some reason, was Gershwin, was Barber, was Americana, and something that, everything that had to be seen as jazz-inspired. Even when I was composing, I got, I come from a background that is half English, half Trinidadian, but no matter what piece I was playing, it's like, oh yes, I could see how that was jazz-inspired. I said, really? That was jazz-inspired? Let me go back to that piece and see what was jazzy about it, but okay. But there was that. And I did enjoy playing composers like Gershwin and Barber. I think they're incredible geniuses. But so were the other composers that I was interested in playing. And I didn't want to be boxed in. So, with Beethoven, I was recording it. I was presenting my Beethoven, my history with Beethoven, and my journey with why Beethoven was such an important part of my life. Right. That's what I was sharing. I wasn't proving anything. I was simply sharing with the public why I love these pieces and what an effect it had on me. And I was doing interviews. There were a number of newspapers who were very interested in my take on this controversy that I didn't even know I caused with the Beethoven Sonatathon. And I thought the interviews went very well, and then I saw in the newspaper, is artist or stuntman. That was one of the headlines of the paper, and I was upset. In retrospect, I shouldn't have been as upset as I was, but it hurt. It hurt, and that I wasn't being heard, no matter what I was saying. But I thought, you know what? If this is a controversy, if people are thinking that I'm fighting, if this is a battlefield, I'm not even going to worry about a battle. I am just going to perform the Sonatathon. So the Sonatathon took place in Toronto. There was a wonderful turnout, and the majority of the audience stayed for the entire Sonatathon. Some of them probably wanting to know whether or not I was going to faint or falter. Others, I think, genuinely were excited to take the journey with me and hearing sides of Beethoven that they haven't heard before. There were a lot of audience members who were coming up to me and said, "Thank you so much for introducing me
Mm-hmm.
to sides of Beethoven that I didn't know existed." And I think we were all taken on this journey. I know that Sonatathon changed my life. It changed the way that I played the piano, that I related to the audience. My playing became a lot more organic and a lot more of give and take, because I didn't think that I was alone on the stage. I didn't even think that there was a wall between the stage and the people sitting in the audience. I think we were all there and we were all feeding each other energy.
Yep.
And
Yep.
most importantly, Beethoven was with us.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it was a very important day for me. And I did 5 or 6 other Sonatathons since. And, every Sonatathon I do, it's always a different experience, but it's always a very spiritually uplifting and enriching experience.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
amazing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm
Please.
sorry, I'm just
No,
going.
please, please, please.
So yeah, so then when it came to the recording, with the amount of press going about the controversy, I was also upset by the fact that they didn't even bother to come and hear my Sonatathon, but also they didn't bother to listen to my box set. So it stood there for a time, and then I kept on performing Beethoven sonatas. But the wonderful thing that came out of this controversy was that I was becoming known in the classical world as this crazy guy who has this vision of Beethoven, and I was very thankful that people wanted to work with me and people wanted to collaborate with me on Beethoven. So there was something wonderful that came out of the out of the press. I worked with wonderful conductors, and we did these concerto cycles together in various places. So that was fantastic. I worked with different violinists playing different Beethoven sonatas. So I have to say, I'm talking about, some of the irksome moments on this journey, but there were also a lot of inspiring aspects that came along as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm wondering if we should venture into those waters now, or simply listen to some of your Beethoven. But what I want to do is I want to ask and repose to this, because this will probably come up throughout. It doesn't have to be spoken about just in one particular boxed in area. But, I too have had experiences similar to yours. And um, why is it, and let's focus it on what you said. Why is it that the public or the industry of classical performing arts would view your effort to document and perform Beethoven, in particular the Sonatathon, as an act of whatever, fill in the adjective of your choice? I think that's incredible, but it's a statement of its time. I think the times hopefully are changing now, and at least we hope so. With all of the statements of solidarity with Black lives, but before that, and this is what you're speaking to, is a time when when the person of color was only able to be viewed or considered for this repertoire, and that repertoire outside of that box was considered an act of defiance, which is really what you're talking about. And I think that's extraordinary. It's tragic, but it is a statement that has been coming up in all kinds of interviews in the wake of George Floyd. Especially the singers, opera singers. I mean, the stories that have been extraordinary. But speak to yours. Speak to yours.
I cannot say that I had a mentor guiding me to different chapters of my musical life. A lot of it was just by gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I was, concert management companies, when I worked with them, and what made me decide to go solo to be my own manager.
Ah,
Um, I felt like I was being booked more than I was being managed. And that was something that I thought, all right, well, I'm keeping in touch with these organizations myself. I really don't need a management company that doesn't really care about the direction of my career. So I
wow.
left. So I left that management company and just kept in touch and chose projects that meant a great deal to me. Um, the mentor that I had was George Walker. His book,
Interesting.
his autobiography, and just seeing a lot of parallels between the struggles that he went through and my struggle. I had absolutely no idea. When it came to Gershwin, when it came to concert organizations, when I was reading more and more and more, my jaw just dropped. I just thought, my goodness, this is almost the exact same
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
When it came to, even when he got the Pulitzer Prize, nothing happened. Meaning, um, it's almost as if he got the prize, but he still had to struggle. And orchestras were being aware of the fact that George Walker was a prominent Black composer, but I just think that he is a prominent composer without without the labeling of color, without the labeling. It is wonderful to celebrate the fact that George Walker was an African American who um, who, against all adversity, believed in himself and kept on creating. That is a statement and something that we all celebrate. And the different examples of no matter what, no matter how many people tell you you cannot do this, they do. But I think the dream of George Walker was to be treated equally to composers like Gershwin, composers like Virgil Thompson, like Samuel Barber, like Elliott Carter, all of these composers that are celebrated right now, and performed just as much. And I was reading the book, and I found myself in tears afterwards. I think to myself, my God, this is the exact same journey. That gave me even more incentive to record the Beethoven, despite people saying people don't want you to do it. People are not, people are not interested in your Beethoven. There were some colleagues. There was actually a manager who said that people are not interested in you playing Austro-Germanic composers. They want you to do Gershwin. He
Why?
said he said
Why?
that right. He said that
Why?
right. And that's what I was asking him. Why? And he couldn't. And he was looking at me. He's like, "Don't you know?"
It's
That was the
crazy.
last, that was the last conversation that I had with that manager.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Where is this prejudice that holds absolutely no sway to people who think about it? There are so many artists. When I was growing up, the first pianist I heard in recital was Andre Watts.
Mm.
The first conductor who I first heard when it came to the Tchaikovsky symphonies was Zubineta. And I heard Jesse Norman.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Kathleen Battle. And so they proved that this is not classical music is not only speaking to a select group of people, it's speaking to everyone.
Yeah.
Kowa Chung, Yo-Yo Ma. So artists of various races coming from various countries. Emil Gilels was not German. Richter was not German, and he was allowed to play Schubert. So, I'm thinking to myself, this prejudice has absolutely, I don't agree with it, and I am not going to agree just because people are, that closed-minded. So I just went and did my thing.
You know, there is so much I could say to this. first off, you did not know until now, and I think it should be public. Most people, well, maybe not most people don't know. George and I know each other well. George Walker and I were friends, in fact, because have been apparently one of one in terms of being a marketing agent promoting the work of contemporary African American composers. It's been a case of tag you're in, especially now since the death of George Floyd. Um, and you know, his journey, the emails that I have of our conversations and about his challenge, which I'm sure mirror what's in his book, is just extraordinary. And I will one day share them publicly because they reveal what you're talking about and what I've experienced in my own experience as a historian and an archivist, and more so as someone of color who's articulate. I mean, I'm going to just briefly say into that, you know, I had a wonderful pitch meeting with a very important American orchestra, with the artistic administration department, and it was as if, Stuart, it was as if that I was a dog who talked. I mean, they had never, ever run into someone of color who was not a conductor or an artistic administrator at another orchestra that had the kind of repertoire background, the knowledge, the savoir faire, the articulateness. It's like, oh, Matilda, look, oh, this dog is talking, you know,
Yeah.
and that's just one example. But George and I talked about his challenge in particular. I'll leave the orchestras out, but I'm much more in the middle of this than many people are aware of. And I know his son, Gregory, and I are friends as well, terrific violinist, concert violinist. This story is tragic and it continues, and we're hopeful. I'll just say, before we go to music, that I'm hopeful that in spite of all of these, and there's a lot of conversation about what I'm about to say, in spite of all of these performing arts organizations who are all on the table with these statements of solidarity with Black Lives, all this, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion talk that's going on, I am hopeful that there will be a sincere realization of some of that it's not just about talk, but it's about action. And there's a lot of people that are in the middle of this that are not seeing that being the case. They're seeing it being, as being essentially, what would I call it? It's very cosmetic, very symbolic. But hopefully, there will be a light at the tunnel, which we will talk about later because I took copious notes of your remarks this morning at the ceremony. And yes, we all hope. And I think what the wonderful thing is, I will share on the topic of George Walker is that his music is being performed this month in England, in London. And I know that is a dream come true for him based on our relationship. We met at the Colors of Music Festival in fall of 2013. But, I think it is important, I would say, in connecting the dots in a through line to all of what you're saying, George Walker's experience as well as my experience, is that it is so important that we carry on, that we allow our light to shine, that we invoke the mantra, if you will, of Maya Angelou, which is, and still we rise, and still I rise, in spite of everything. So, and in your case, you are a brilliant pianist. Now, I have to share with the audience that doesn't know, and because this is really helpful to anchor why I'm having this conversation with you. Hello everyone, I come from a piano and choral and vocal house. My parents were, I mean, when I was 4 and 5, because of my mother's connection and love of Marian Anderson as a teenager in North Philadelphia, I already knew all about this at 4 and 5. And just this whole idea about pianists. My mother was, as an African American woman who had a piano growing up in her house, uh, fell in love with the piano. And before I was born, she shared with me much later about her love of piano as an African American woman, about piano music, and how important it was for her in 1952, way before I was born, to see Vladimir Horowitz in Recital in Pasadena, and how she never stopped talking about that, and how Horowitz infused my early exposure as an African American child, and in my case, the term was Negro, to this exposure of Chopin and Liszt, in particular, since those were the two composers that Horowitz, showcased. But then going on as a little kid in piano, and the fact that at USC, University of Southern California, at that time, there was a house, an old Victorian house that became kind of the place for master students, and Heifetz taught in this Victorian. Piatigorsky, the famous cellist, taught. William Primrose, violist, and then there was a famous pianist in his day, John Crown. And my mother, being in love with piano music, she would have to wait for my sister, and this is the important piece that I didn't share. My sister was an aspiring mezzo soprano, and she was studying with a vocal coach at this building, and I cannot tell you how much this meant. And I think a lot of this interest comes from who we are and what our exposure is. But I grew up with all of this, and I think it's so important to share that, because that foundation allows me to appreciate you in particular. We're both in piano as little kids. You're the prodigy. I was, I won't go there. I'll just say that when we had a Kimball baby grand in our house, and I remember I was 5 years old, and I never, I was like thinking, I think we had just gotten this piano, we had moved, and I was sitting down at the piano bench, and I was going to just, have the magic chord, opening chord to the Appassionata Sonata or something like that. And of course I didn't, because I didn't have that capacity, but I had the appreciation for it already. So yeah. To that note, let us go now into screen share and listen to an extraordinary performance, an excerpt of it, not the entire work, of the Opus 111, the Sonata number 32, which is a live performance of Stewart at Koerner Hall in the Royal Academy of Music in Toronto. And then we will come out of that and talk more about this sonata, about Beethoven's and sonatas. So let me first make sure I have everything tuned here, because this looks good. Okay. And now we go here. And this is it. Okay. Now we'll go into from here. All right. So enjoy this. By the way, if you have headphones or earbuds, please use them. It's gorgeous. Stewart, I'm applauding you before we start. It's just wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Glorious, glorious, glorious. Your technique, needless to say, is flawless. The poetry is stunning. The moderate use of rubato. I mean, everything is there. I mean, it's glorious. And when I listen to this, I have a personal experience as well. I know my mother's experience, but I shared with you. I was at the 1992 Evo Pogarellich piano competition in Pasadena at the Ambassador Auditorium, and I actually attended a Sonatathon, if you will. I was at all three cycles,
Oh, wow.
and that was an experience in itself. And of course, the Opus 111 was performed, and but the poetry, the finesse, the technique you bring to this is just it's gorgeous, and it is deserving to be expressed without any kind of limitation. I mean, your gift for this comes across, and I have to say to those who say you should not play this because you're supposed to play Gershwin or you're supposed to play, Louis Moreau Gottschalk or Ellington, all of which are great, but your gift with the Beethoven is exceptional. It is as good as your teachers. Leon Fleischer, of course, who famously made that recording, the Concerti recording with George Shell and the Cleveland Orchestra in the early 60s, as good as anything Gary Graffman would have done. I think it is marvelous. So I'm just saying that to introduce your comment, Terry, back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, please.
Yeah, this was the first time after doing various sonatathons that I had the courage to program one sonata on a regular program.
Mm-hmm.
That happened to be at Koerner Hall, and it just felt it felt wonderful because I was in my hometown in Toronto, and I felt like I was playing for friends. A lot of them were at the Sonatathon, so it was like not a revisit, but it was like we were remembering that journey. And there's something about the Opus 111. People always ask me if I had to pick a favorite, what would it be? And that's always a tough one. I love all 32, but if I had to choose one, it would be 111 because the way Opus 111 makes me feel at the end, it's like we've all been through the baptism of fire and water, and there was a spiritual cleansing, there was a relief, there was a sense of we made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Beethoven believing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is this belief in the beauty of what humanity can bring to each other. And especially in the last movement and those last final sections, where it's like a hymn to humanity as well as an intimacy that speaks to one listener at a time. It's and at that moment, I don't know, the last chord. After the last chord, it takes every time I play it, it takes all the strength I have to get out from that keyboard. It just it's such. It's I think it's one of the great utterances of humanity, this piece. So it's always a joy to play.
And isn't it amazing that he composed this while he was deaf? That he could create something during that incredibly traumatic moment that speaks with such profundity, across the generations. I mean, this was written, in 1825 or so? It was one of his last pieces. He dies in 1827, but yet here we are in 2020, and still that work of over, almost 2 centuries ago speaks so deeply.
Absolutely.
That is really incredible, and a statement of incredible, profound genius and a profound understanding of the human condition in many ways, in my opinion. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. And so I have to ask you this just on the technical point of view. What is your method of practice? I mean, especially when I'm looking at the idea of the Sonatathon. I mean, being at the Pogarellich piano competition all three cycles was like a Sonatathon.
Yeah.
I shared with you previously, also at Ambassador Auditorium in Pasadena, Mike, I don't know if I met him personally, but I had a chance to finally hear Michael Ponti, who did a version of a Sonatathon. I think he did two Beethoven sonatas. I think there was a Scriabin sonata, there was Scriabin Versa Flamme. There was a whole bunch, and it was Bach. And I think he did a Bach. He was either English or French suite. I mean, it was like, good Lord, all this, it was really quite a statement.
Yeah.
So how do you memorize all of this material? What is your process? Famously violinists talk about, practicing 10 hours a day. What is your method?
I really don't know how many hours a day I practice. I do practice a lot, and there's a lot of ways I practice, from reading a lot about every piece. As a composer, I'm just fascinated by how composers of the past and of the present get inspired. What prompts them to write a certain piece of music at that particular time? That is always an ongoing interest of mine. And just the fact that these sonatas were seen as vehicles for everyone to play. They would buy the piece
Hmm.
of music and they would play it for their enjoyment, or for their sense of relief, or for their sense of catharsis in their home. And that was something that inspired me too. And it brought me, I think that was another thing about the Sonatathon that brought me to this place where, we're all on this journey together. It's like, no matter how vast the concert hall is or how small, it feels like a living room space because we're all in this together. Um, Technically, the way I practice is, just practicing until I get it right. Just a lot of slow work, a lot of careful work, and more quality work than quantity work. I'm not sure if I practice 10 hours. I wouldn't be surprised if I did, but it's really a matter of just going at it through every single place. So I find, like, I am very convinced that this is my interpretation, as well as honoring, the Viennese gesture, and
Hmm.
the music that Beethoven was inspired by. When it came to one of the earlier sonatas, the Tarantella movement, the
Hmm.
finale, and just again familiarizing myself with just that Tarantella, the mood, the gesture, and the rhythm, and yeah, just a lot of very careful practicing technically and musically. To
But
build the stamina for a sonatathon is, a lot of strength training, a lot of exercise, and a lot of keto, which is
keto,
which is
tell me,
something that is
tell
that
me
is
about the
not,
keto.
that is not fun about the preparation. Physically, I feel so much better and I get a lot of energy. But yeah, I have to stay away from bread. Bread is my weakness. Bread and pastries, none of that. No pasta, nothing. Maybe a little bit of soba noodles, but a lot of protein and a lot of carbs like vegetables. And
Hmm.
every day, just building up more and more and more strength and more endurance. And when it comes to playing the sonatas the whole way through, I never play the sonatathon, the entire sonatathon before the actual event. So sometimes, it's divided into three parts.
Right.
So I would do maybe part one time, part two another time, part one and three another time, part two and one another time, putting them in all kinds of different orders so that there's muscle memory, as well as I have a photographic memory too, so that comes into play, and just playing it over and over and over and over until it's coming out of, it's like the sweat is pouring out. Beethoven Opus 109, 53, and all that. So it's like I'm living, breathing, and eating Beethoven for quite a while leading up to the event.
Something that really is something, because I wondered how that would work for you. I mean, my God. I hear stories. There are lots of stories of people that go, especially like in a piano competition, like a Pogarellich competition, at least that first one, where, there are people that are gifted from their various countries, but yet when you get into the pressure, that the people snap or to have temporary memory loss or all of those things. And but yet you have, I wasn't aware that you had a photographic memory, but I'm not surprised because it shows. And I have not had the chance to hear your Sonatathon, but I had read about one. I think it was up in the Bay Area, I guess a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, that is so fantastic. And I think it's important that you're doing the work you're doing. When I say that, I'm meaning to say that you, as a person of color, who's told that you can't go here or do that because this is not for you, I think it's really not, it's not radical, it is radically important that you do and you go there and you challenge the norm and you excel. Because that's what Marian Anderson did. That's what Leontine Price did. That's what Andre Watts did. That's what all of the, Kathy Battle even. It is important that we individually and collectively rise, and still we rise, as Maya Angelou has said so prominently, that we give our gift and share our gift. And there is so much behind that. And I could go on and on, which brings us to some things that I wrote down, as I shared with you. Congratulations for listening audience today, at least live on the internet, over the internet. Stewart became the honorary fellow. He was given the honorary fellow at his alma mater, Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, Canada. Very nice introduction of you by, I guess, the provost. I don't know if that's the right word. And then your remarks were exceptional. And of course, I couldn't help but think about one pianist in particular when you did the Great Gate of Kiev. And that, of course, for me, I'm thinking of William Capell. And we've talked about that because he was famous for that. But I want to speak to some of that, some notes I wrote, and just have you speak to it. Some of the things that the comments I quickly wrote down were a light at the end of the tunnel, preparing for, you were advising the graduates. So a light at the end of the tunnel to prepare for change that is not expected, challenge the music world by sharing your authentic self, breaking tradition in shapes, shades, and forms, carrying a torch of guts, solidarity, and innovation, carry the love and music in the world to transport that love to every person. That was so dynamic. And obviously it comes from you. Do you want to speak to any of that?
Well, I really believe that. I really believe that. I think all musicians have a responsibility of reaching everyone and embracing everyone who is coming to us, who is coming to our concerts, and making them feel welcome and treasured by every second that we share our gift of music with them. I think that's very important. And reaching all demographics, all races, all creeds, all walks of life. They're all coming to see you, to see this individual. And it is that moment you're giving them yourself for however length of time. So it's every performance is precious. And I think one thing about the COVID pandemic, what was beautiful in this awful time that we are living in right now, was the fact that we saw musicians play for each other. We've in room spaces, people have been doing outdoor, mini recitals, on their porch. People who could bring their instruments out. I wish I could. But woodwind players, string players, we had these impromptu performances, for their neighborhood. And I thought that was a wonderful gesture to the public, as well as, videos talking about how they're doing, and 1 hour, just taking 1 hour out of their day to play for people who are tuning in on Facebook or on Twitter, social media. I think, the origins of social media, we came back to the origins of what social media was about, was connecting to people
Hmm.
who are, who may not live where you are,
Right.
but we're all connected in some way. So I thought that was wonderful, and I wanted, the ultimate utopia, at least for me, in this classical world, is never forgetting the feeling that we had listening to one another and playing for one another. And if we could bring that attitude and that focus to performances, if we ever reach the time where we could play for people in a concert hall, and I don't
Hmm.
know if there's any sense of what will be normal again, but
Hmm.
whatever that normal is, that it's something that we embrace and it's something that we enjoy and and really are thankful for.
Yeah, indeed, indeed, and I agree with that. And I think, yeah, your remarks about the virtual salon and how really playing for each other and playing for each other to keep each of us individually and collectively kind of in sync, to not forget
Yeah.
or not feel disconnected, I think is so important. And I think that that's essential, and that is, I have this history around, as a consultant, talking about the music as the universal language, and how music transforms, transfigures, heals, and connects intergenerationally as well as cross culturally. you know we are at that point where, hopefully, that this unfortunate moment of the COVID-19 pandemic helps us to reacquaint with ourselves with that basic thing, and to break out of boxes. And I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, all of the virtual, all of the some of the amazing virtual, in particular, I'm thinking specifically of, as a former cellist. There's this gorgeous, I don't know how, what, 200, 300 cellists around the world doing the Barber Adagio. I mean, that was incredible, as well as a project that I was involved with, about 50 singers,
Mhm.
under the direction of Nicole Heaston Lane, doing Lift Every Voice and Sing, as a statement for Black lives. I think it was gorgeous. But there's so much more to say, and we are going to get to that. But let's have another showcase of music, more Beethoven. Beethoven is 250 years old in this time period, so we're celebrating his genius as well as the genius of one of the most gifted pianists of our time, Stewart Goodyear. So we're going to go back into share screen. We're going to listen to an excerpt, a shorter excerpt, from a performance in Germany of the Pastorale Sonata. So here we go. Oh, wrong one.
Yeah.
What a beautiful performance. You play with such wonderful poetry. And in both of the examples that we've been enjoying, your audience is rapt. They are rapt and just, they are so into it, which of course should be. But I am just, as I said again, coming from a piano house, I cannot tell you, my mother would have loved you. You have no idea. Good Lord. You know, I just can't stop saying that. Both my parents. I mean, we were all of this was you are in many ways the manifestation of my parents' dream of supporting young people of in particular young people of color in the classical performing arts. And so, I naturally would gravitate towards just appreciating more than appreciating someone like yourself. What was it like to be in Frankfurt in that hall, and what else was on your program?
This was an interesting project. So the Frankfurt Radio Symphony Orchestra came up with a group of concerts shared by two pianists, myself and Pierre-Laurent Aimard. And the focus was to bookend, not bookend. So there would first be a Beethoven symphony, followed by a piano solo work of the 20th century, followed by another Beethoven symphony, followed by a piano solo work of Beethoven. Now, for the 20th century work, what they asked me to do was find a work that would either directly have been inspired by Beethoven or indirectly. What I would find, in the whole world of 20th century piano music, which would speak to me and have some kind of what would fit in this program.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first concert, I did two. The first concert, I picked 3 etudes of Ligeti. Now, Ligeti is a composer I was introduced to on a Leonard Bernstein LP. I was a great fan of Leonard Bernstein and really enjoyed the fact that there was no limit to how he shared his passion for music. He did lectures, he conducted orchestral concerts, he was a composer, he was a pianist.
Right.
And, and he was composing not only for classical concert, he was also composing film scores and musicals. And I just thought, my goodness, there was absolutely no limit. And he loved everything. And he was so curious about everything.
Right.
And so I collected a lot of Bernstein recordings and was always curious to find out what his take on Brahms would be, his take on Berlioz, and also his take on 20th century music. So Ligeti's Atmospheres.
Yes.
And,
yes, I had that LP too. Yeah.
And that was the first track, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first on side one. I thought, whoa, just that orchestral sound just hit me. And I thought, my goodness, who is this composer? And then Lux Aeterna came about, and then eventually the piano etudes. I thought, my goodness, I would love to include some of these etudes or all of these etudes on a program. And so this opportunity came about, and I said, well, I presented the idea of doing Ligeti and explained why. And in the video where one could see my performance of the Ligeti etude, I did a kind of a preface explaining the etudes that I picked and why I thought each etude spoke to Symphony Number 8 of Beethoven.
Interesting.
And so, and then the second concert I did John Grigliano's Fantasia on an Ostinato, which of course is inspired by the second movement of the Seventh Symphony that was also programmed at that second concert. So that was very exciting. And also having a chance to perform my vision of Beethoven to audiences in Germany was a wonderful opportunity and a very profound one. And I was so moved by how receptive the German audiences were.
Yeah.
Because, this, the home of Beethoven, one of the European homes of Beethoven, a lot of audiences think of Beethoven so strongly and passionately, and they probably have their own idea of what Beethoven sounds like. And the fact that they
Right.
were so receptive to what I brought was something that's a moment I will always treasure.
Yeah, no, well, it's clear why they enjoyed it. I mean, because it's iconic. I mean, your performance, your idea, your vision of the work, certainly of the Pastorale and certainly of the Opus 111. I mean, your vision is right there, and your technique and your precision and how it unfolds would only endear someone who, has the background. I mean, that's how I come to you because I have the background and appreciation. My mother would be just falling all over you. I mean, my God. I mean, when this is an aside. So in her late years, I mean, all throughout when I was growing up, we had obviously the Kimball, baby grand, but she would actually practice the Beethoven Moonlight. I don't, you wouldn't, there's no way for you to have known that, but that even as late as she was 85, she was still practicing the opening movement as well as I think the middle movement. So, we collectively appreciate someone like you. But I think it's really also interesting what you mentioned because I need to bring our mutual friend into this, and that's Kevin John Edisay. Kevin and we are all friends, and Kevin and I had a recent Zoom meeting talking about a whole bunch of things about this whole idea in the wake of George Floyd about programming in Germany, the music of contemporary African American composers, since I represent them, many of them. And what his journey is also interesting as well, but it speaks to yours that once there, I think because Germany has historically, at least since the '60s, especially in the opera houses, has an exposure to people of color singing in roles. I mean, Marian Anderson was in Paris and in Germany in the '20s. Leontine Price is all over Germany, in the early '60s. I mean, she's celebrated by Herbert von Karajan, and of course later you have of course Simon Estes at Deutsche Oper and a whole number of people, not just Simon. There are singers that I have known that have I had the fortune when I was there in '94 to meet Gert Friedrich, who was kind of God, because he was the one who was saying yes and green lighting and giving permission for people of color to shine in music that they were not supposed to, according to those who want to box them in. So I think it's really good that people like you and Kevin in particular excel and are embraced for your gift. Because the gift is it's the gift of music that should and must always speak,
Yeah.
irrespective of who is performing it, because there's something universal about those of us who understand the work and can communicate it as brilliantly and as I want to say ethereally. So how we communicate music that moves people, that touches people, that should always be above anything else. That should always be. So I'm very much there, and I'm so grateful that I'm hoping that I don't know, since you're doing your own marketing, uh, clearly people know of you, and I'm hopeful that you and Kevin can do something. Yeah, I'm just putting it out there to the universe since we all know each other. Because there are many people there's Jonathan Hayward, who I also know, who's in North Germany, but Kevin is probably of all of the conductors of color or of having African descent. Yeah, he's the most well known in Europe. But it's interesting. You mentioned Ligeti. I had no idea. I'm thinking of you, and please, I apologize. Uh, I was not aware of your interest in contemporary music because
Yeah.
my awareness was more about the Beethoven. I was aware that you were doing the Rachmaninoff second and third,
Yes.
or at least the Rachmaninoff second, and perhaps the Rhapsody on theme of Paganini. But I wasn't aware of this. And on another note, this is kind of humorous, but not really humorous. But I can only imagine you in the Cacciatorian. you know,
It's a fantastic concerto. I
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
enjoyed
I was thinking of you this morning. As I said, I was thinking of William Capell because of the great gig of Cave, and then I would say, oh, Stewart is. I just see Stewart in the Cacciatorian because you have the technique for it. I
it.
mean, and it's not performed. I don't know why it is not performed. Do you have any thought on that?
I don't know why the Cacciatorian is not performed. It's so interesting when in our world, what makes a reappearance, like the Grieg piano concerto, for example,
Right,
was probably one of the most performed concerti on orchestral programs, most recorded on LPs in
right.
the early part of the 20th century, and then somehow it lapsed. People were, I don't know. I don't know. The attitude towards the Greek was I think, very snobbish. They probably thought, oh, it doesn't hold out as well as the Brahms concerti, for example. It's just another
Hmm.
utterance. It's just,
Hmm.
again, sharing that composer's personality and the love of where he came from, and and setting it into music. So the Grieg was always a favorite of mine, as well as the Brahms. But
Interesting.
finally, the Grieg suddenly is on programs again. Maybe the
Yeah,
Cacciatore will
interesting.
probably follow. We'll see. But yeah, I can't. Um, I don't know what reason why Cacciatore is not taken off
Yeah,
yet.
and about the Schumann, I would imagine is still, everywhere. The Schumann
Oh,
concerto.
Robert Schumann, yes,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, not the William. No, Robert Schumann.
William
Yes, not
Schumann piano
William. Not
concerto.
William Schumann. Yes, that's of course not. No, I know that much. You're
No,
talking to.
the Robert Schumann was always on programs, but somehow, yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear that much. In fact, talking about new music or 20th century music in particular, in addition to the Cacciatorian, this is something of what I'm about to say is obviously rarely programmed today, but was bigger in the 60s, 1960s in particular. But I can also see you shining because this really requires technique in the Hinastera piano concertos.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
another.
am I right?
Oh yeah.
I'm sure that's but I could see it in the right place. That's a really difficult work, but it's a brilliant work. I
Well,
had a chance to hear it once.
music. I love. I think I love almost everything he wrote.
Really?
From his guitar sonata, his cello concerti, to his piano concerti, to his
Right.
ballets. It's just, one after another. I'm just so fascinated by what Hinastera comes up with in his music.
Will you
I'm very good.
program some of his? Will you
Yeah, I
perform
hope to someday. I hope to someday.
someday?
Yeah.
Someday. But first on to Beethoven. True, indeed. And on that note, I should go back into share screen to some images. But I'm wondering, actually, I'm wondering, what would you like to do? First, because I wanted to talk about, and I think we've kind of already covered it, and so you can tell me yes or no. Your blog has an amazing piece in it called You.
Yeah.
We've already spoken a little bit of touched on it. Shall we touch on it more, or shall we go further into Beethoven?
Yeah, we could touch on it.
Okay, so I'm going to read from this. I assume that's okay. I do that. Yes? Do I have your permission? Okay. So people who have been on the receiving end of this reaction know deeply how much this hurts you. This is a reaction I get from some of my colleagues in the classical world. The same reaction I got when I was invited to recreate the US debut of Glenn Gould at a prominent music series. You are playing the music of the most famous Canadian pianist? The same reaction I got when I was invited to replace a well-known pianist at an international festival. You are replacing one of the key components of the classical period, and it goes on and on. Speak to that. We've already dealt into some of that, but do you feel that this, which was so passionately your experience, and I already know from another interview that this took a long time coming for you to actually put this on paper, But do you think in this time, and when I say in defining this time as the time post George Floyd, at
Yeah.
the time, hopefully, pray, hopefully, past the current occupant of the White House, do you think that the industry of classical music will finally embrace people like you? Where I'm gonna, and I will extemporate it, I will say more on that to the point where it is Stewart Goodyear has the open door opportunity to shine, where it is not always, and I'm sorry if this is political, folks, but it is not always going to be the artistic administrators always bringing back Emmanuel Ax or Yefim Bronfman or Yves Thibaudet or who's the other one I'm thinking of? Hélène Grimaud. You know, there are other gifted people like Simon who can sell tickets too if you give them a chance.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm very, I recognize that that could be seen as a political statement, but it is part of the reality that I think your blog speaks to.
Yeah. I don't think it's a political statement. I'm hoping we've gone to the point where this is a statement that is about allowing people of every race a forum to share their music. I hope that's not political. I think it's human. Um,
Well, you know what I'm saying. I mean,
no, I know exactly what you're saying, and I think you're absolutely right. And it is, unfortunately, in 2020, become a political issue because politicians are trying very hard to keep the systemic racist status quo. So what we are talking about is a political issue, and I'm hoping that it eventually doesn't become one. It doesn't become something that is political, but something that people just embrace the idea that classical music is for everyone, and not just putting lip service to that
right,
statement, but action. And
right.
yeah, what to add to my U blog? I think my U post. Yeah, I think what inspired me to write that post was, I was talking to another, an artistic administrator actually, who, just in passing said, I just found out that I'm the first Black
Right.
pianist who ever recorded all of the sonatas and the concertos of Beethoven. You?
Yeah.
And I
How dare you? How dare you?
like,
You know,
you?
and but
Out of
yeah,
out, out of
yeah,
every other yeah, I don't know, but I'm thinking to myself, all right, why it made me see this artistic administrator in a very, very different light. And I'm thinking to
of
myself, well,
course.
exactly how do you see me if you are so surprised? And anyway,
Well, I'll answer that for you. You're supposed to be playing Florence Price, in solo piano. Florence Price and William Grant Still, and maybe some Gershwin thrown in, and of course Ellington. That is how they want to, some of them want to box you. But I think, as you're right, we're hopeful that we're going to be able to move past this. But it is not just your challenge. Let me tell you.
our
It
challenge.
is the challenge of every composer that I am working with. In particular, it has been unreal. Um, and I have stories to tell. I will be discreet here, but I will be very discreet and say a very prominent or two prominent orchestras in the United States, when given the opportunity to honor John Lewis
Yeah,
through music and through a particular work of a composer who's very well known, who I represent, a work that really so speaks to the whole life and life's work and is so inspiring. The idea of honoring a Black man by a symphony orchestra. Who knew
yeah,
that was a radical idea?
yeah,
Um, and while he was living, it could have happened. But no, why would we want to honor John Lewis? He's not, we don't, he's, I know this sounds really crazy but I am being very, very discreet because there's a whole lot about this. I'm not telling you the composer, the work, or the orchestra, but uh, the artistic administrator involved, that was just stunning.
Mm.
Um, but it's okay because again, we invoke Maya Angelou and still
And
we
still,
rise. So still we must rise. So on that note, I'm going to go forward to a little bit more controversy. We're going to go back into share screen. We're going to look at some images because I deal with this historically around this whole idea of how would I say of this whole idea of colorism and how there's been a caste system in this country, United States, around color coming out of slavery, and how that has impacted how we see and how we want to present ourselves. Certainly, African Americans and music. I think there's a through line that extends beyond as well because these images are really quite stunning. And the controversy right now around Beethoven, his origin is really quite interesting. But let's take a look at these. Let's go back and share screen here. All right. Let's see here. Next. So there has been, this year in particular, a whole range of conversations about Beethoven. Beethoven being black, or Beethoven, people fighting against the idea of Beethoven being black, and fighting against the idea of the African presence in classical music in the 16th, 17th century in Europe.
Mhm.
It is known that Beethoven, one of his parents is German, and the other, he grew up in the Flemish area, which is now considered Holland or the Dutch area. But there has been some research that his maternal grandmother may have had Moorish roots, or have been exposed to or had a connection with one of the Moors from North Africa, who the Moors were very much a part of Spain at a particular time in the 16th, I guess the 16th century. But looking at these images has been really interesting for me to think about and imagine and to understand what people are talking about today. I mean, there's a range of things. There's this whole cancel culture right now around Beethoven because Beethoven has been identified as, or embraced by, like, the Nazis and other white, the white cultural industry as, as an elitist, a symbol of elitism of the classical performing arts as a paradigm, for lack of a better term. But you also look at the reality of these images, the fact that there has been documentation that Beethoven in his time was considered a more olive complexion, that there was this whitening of Beethoven from his original images. Here we see in the lower, I think on the lower right, you see Beethoven as a young man and in this kind of circular portrait. Then you have Beethoven a little older, this image of Beethoven conducting.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed to Joseph Boulogne, Saint Chevalier de Georges on the left, and to George or Georg Bridgewater and the right, Bridge Tower on the right. Chevalier Saint George was in Paris during the court of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. He was there, had been there, and had been very popular and had written operas and other things for the royal court before Mozart showed up in Paris. And that they actually, I've been doing some reading on it, they actually met and apparently had conversation. And then all of a sudden, after Mozart and Chevalier met and connected, that there was this new style of sound in Mozart's music that had not been there before.
Right.
But yet, so Chevalier Saint George is considered the Black Mozart, where he actually had the style a style, apparently it's just been documented, that came into Mozart's music.
Right.
And became he in fact enabled on some level, or inspired, maybe inspired is the best word, inspired a sound world that had not been in his music previously that came into his music after being in connection with Joseph Boulogne, Chevalier Saint George. And the interesting thing about the Beethoven Bridge Tower
Yeah.
connection,
Right.
you know, you look at these pictures, okay? These pictures aren't fake, you know. And the fact that I understand from my reading that there was, you know, you feel for for Ludwig because he was by himself. He was seeking relationships with women. You know, Für Elise was written for a very someone he wanted to marry, and apparently there was this interconnection between Bridge Tower. There was a woman of similar interests that Ludwig had an interest in, and also George had an interest. Bridge Tower had an interest in. And what is interesting is that yet they knew each other, and yet they knew each other well enough that Beethoven had originally had a conversation with Bridge Tower about his sonata, his famous, what became later known as the Kreutzer Sonata, but yet he had dedicated the sonata to him, and yet Bridge Tower, more than Beethoven, was known as the Austrian mulatto, you know, in his time. So it's interesting. So what is your take on some of this?
Um, it's interesting how I'm very curious. Before I answer the response to this research, how many people are against the idea of Beethoven having a background that is Black?
There are. The resistance is
Like
huge.
lots?
Tragically, the resistance has been huge because he represents an icon of the culture of music that has always been identified as Anglo-Saxon or white.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the cancel culture that is currently in conversation on social media about Beethoven is because he has embraced, not Beethoven himself didn't, but people have ascribed to him through the generations
Right.
this iconography of and a celebration of European classical music that he is. Beethoven wasn't. This isn't ascribed. Beethoven wasn't that way, but how Beethoven has been used over the generations
Yeah.
has been identified with that. You know, we both love Beethoven. I think we both recognize the incredible gift of Beethoven. And in the past year and a half, I have come to recognize the incredible gift of Joseph Boulogne, you know, Chevalier Saint George.
Yes.
Incredible story.
Yeah.
But why was his story made less significant? Why was he marginalized when he was as important to his generation as Rameau and Couperin, you know, who are all, and Lully, who they were all writing during the same time period, and Boulogne's work is on that level,
Yeah.
on the level that Mozart would find something very interesting in what Boulogne was doing, so interesting that he would adapt it himself.
Yeah.
But yet, so you know, it's quite a statement. I hope that if it, you know, there's such a fierce response by many white academics and Beethoven specialists and historians to this notion and trying to explain away, you know,
How are they
the
trying to
images.
explain it?
But
How do they try to explain it? Like what is their rationale
well,
by
you know, the mother, both the mother and the father were German, and he was born in Bonn, and you know, they look at it just, you know, in the straightforward, you know, it's not possible, you know. I don't care what the images look like, it's not possible. You know, and I look at these images, and you know, the fact is that there were many talented musicians and authors. Dumas, you know,
yeah,
Alexander Dumas, who wrote Three
yes,
Musketeers, is a black Frenchman. you know, and of course Pushkin later in I guess what in the 19th century, Alexander Pushkin's a Black Russian who's very important writer in Russian history, and he's never been relegated because of his skin color. But somehow in music, that there is this challenge at this moment that this icon of classical music could not be possibly someone that has anything but pure Aryan whiteness to it, which I think is unfortunate. And it also is quite interesting when we look at the next slide that deals with Beethoven's nephew, Carl von Beethoven, who was the son of Beethoven's brother, Caspar. And there was this huge fight, this huge custody fight after Beethoven's brother died. But you look at these pictures, and that I think will say something as well.
Mhm.
So here we have the young Beethoven on the right. In the middle is the young Carl von Beethoven. And here is the older Carl von Beethoven. I think he died like in 1856. But
Yes. Yeah.
here's the Beethoven. This is Beethoven's nephew.
Mhm.
Okay. What's
Yeah.
interesting about this image is that Carl van Beethoven looks almost identical to Louis Moreau Gottschalk,
Mhm.
who was identified as white for many years, and then more recently, in the past 20 years, his Creole, as
Yeah.
in French Creole, Louisiana heritage was acknowledged, and now he's been considered by some people, many circles, as as one of the early Black composers working in America, but not identified. It's interesting when you look at this. I mean, you cannot tell me, well, you could tell me. Certainly, you're welcome to tell me, but I'm looking at Carl van Beethoven.
Yeah.
He is absolutely, in American terms, a Black Creole
Mhm.
from New Orleans from the same time period,
Right.
the 1850s. There's no question. So for those who want to debate it or refuse to acknowledge the potential, I think it is their choice. But I think it would be hugely significant if we begin to um, embrace the possibility that giftedness knows no color line.
Right.
Go beyond that and understand it, because when you are looking at these images, especially if you are in this country, um, there are many mixed race, black and other whatever it is that are part of the gene pool.
Yes.
But we have to acknowledge that and not run away from it, is what I'm saying. So I'm going to go back out of share screen before we go to our last piece.
Oh, you're asking me what my, what my opinion about
All of this is.
I find it fascinating that people are wanting to violently debate the possibility that Beethoven had Black blood in him. And it's almost as if, going back to Hans von Bülow and calling Beethoven's Sonata the New Testament, speaking of the New Testament,
Right.
where people are, vehemently disagreeing with the idea that Jesus
Same, very same. Yeah.
had some Black blood.
Right.
And in both, both worlds of music and religion, and especially when they emerge, you find out who the real Christians and the real lovers of music are, and how, as we're saying, that God is everyone and the Son of God is everyone, and classical music is supposedly for everyone. That means it speaks to everyone. That means everyone deserves a place where one can share their love of music. Why are there people who are saying God is white? Jesus was white. Jesus was nothing but blonde and blonde with blue eyes.
Hmm.
Same thing with the argument Beethoven couldn't have been anything but white. Is like,
Hmm.
and you know, and Beethoven. I'm hoping that's not a controversial statement, but many people would think that Beethoven is like the Jesus of the classical music.
Yeah.
The way Beethoven is worshipped
Right.
is is on the same lines
Yeah.
as people, you know, and you know, and you know, um, yeah, just going back to the layers of systemic racism and you know how they use religion in order to justify systemic racism to
Oh,
challenge
sure.
to
Sure.
challenge that by going to exactly who Jesus was, exactly who Beethoven is.
Hmm.
It's fascinating, and it's definitely opening up um, individuals um, who want to challenge that. And you know, what prejudice are they coming from? I think this is
Hmm.
an element that is exposing a lot of people in the classical music industry, and you get to know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
So
No,
no,
I agree with you totally, and it's particularly come before Beethoven. It's particularly come into view around Chevalier, Saint George. I mean, Joseph Boulogne Chevalier Saint George is a mixed race. It's a black Frenchman who was just a Renaissance man, but he happened to be a fabulous composer. And he's
exactly.
working in the court of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. And Mozart shows up after he is famed, after, Chevalier St. James has already, showcased his thing. And there's this study that there was research that's been done that Mozart before Paris did not have this particular sound. And that the fact that they two knew each other and had, I guess meals together, and that all of a sudden after, now this is really interesting. And there are those who don't want to accept the possibility that the real Mozart is actually Joseph Boulogne
Like
Chevalier.
it's
You
the
know,
same disease for the king of rock and roll.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, my uncle, yes, this is a family story. My uncle was, I'm named after Bill Doggett, who was a headliner in the late 50s. And yes, Elvis, El, Arthur Crudup is the famous blues singer that Elvis Presley borrowed from and sang his first hits were Arthur Crudup blues songs, but it was done by, it was done by a white guy, and there was a challenge as you probably know, the biggest challenge during the rhythm and blues and rock and roll era was the fact that it brought young people together for the love of music, but it challenged segregation, which was the reigning legal thing, separate but equal, white only, colored only, the mixing of the races by music was considered verboten, it was
Variations
dangerous.
on the same thing, same theme when it comes to the classical world. It's that same.
Yes, and in my work in particular, that blends to thematically to what you're speaking of, as well as what Kevin, John Edison has experienced as a Black German, breaking through barriers there. You know, and we're hopeful. I'm just putting this out there rhetorically. Will the world of classical music, because of this time, this special moment we're in, will this world begin to understand that it has been? Will it embrace and acknowledge the reality that it has been on certain levels? Not talking about with singers, because that's a whole nother world, but otherwise, for
Yeah,
violinists, for pianists, for cellists, for conductors, for composers, will it recognize and acknowledge its history as being the last bastion of segregation,
I
which I
hope.
think in many ways it is, and that must be faced and addressed. And we're hopeful, that we can get beyond that, because there is no question in my mind. If I am in the blessed to be in the position in 2022 to program content and to recommend artists, I am going to absolutely have Stewart Goodyear recommended as my pianist of choice because people need to hear him. God bless Yefim Bronfman. God bless Emmanuel Axe. God bless Yves Thibaudet and Hélène Grimaud and Yuja Wang and Lang Lang. Great, good for them. But there's also you. And there's also Andre Watts, and that we won't even touch that because I have quite the passion and the story about what seems like he was blacklisted by certain artistic administrators and orchestras. I will not mention names, but I will say, I mean, this is incredible. How is it possible that this person has to play with this small orchestra instead of this major orchestra when he has the capacity, the renown, he can sell tickets, if it's the issue of selling tickets. I mean, this is also a whole conversation around concert violinists. Why is it always Joshua Bell?
Right.
Why can't it be, what is it? I hope I don't butcher her name, Kelly Ann Tompkins. Why can't it be Ty Murray? Why is it always Leila Josefowitz? Just because you don't know their name doesn't mean that the audiences won't get to know their name. But if you refuse to book them, then they become into obscurity because no one, well, who's this? Well, I know who Joshua Bell is. I know who, what I'm saying. I was about to botch her name. I know Hillary Hahn, but what this Kellyanne Tompkins? Who is that? I mean, she's black. Why? I mean, so, not that I mean, she can play. I mean, my God, let her play the corngold. Look, let her play. Tchaikovsky, whatever it is. I mean, she's So I think you get it. So we're going.
All different composers. She's a master of it all.
Yeah. I mean, famously so. And my God, and Ty Murray, the Bartok second. I mean, she's shy. Not just the Sibelius, which I guess is a commonly popular program, but I'm looking forward to hearing artistic administrators embrace composers, not just African American composers, but even European composers that they have shied away from, like Szymanowski, Karol Szymanowski's violin concerti are gorgeous. What who is it I'm thinking of? There's I'm trying to remember his name. It's a German violinist who was popular in the 80s and 90s, who was championing Szymanowski, but I can't remember his name right at the moment. But but the same thing. There is music to be heard that deserves to be heard, as well as artists. So. But anyway, I can go on and on this, and it's great that we agree, and that Beethoven.
I must say, one of the most gorgeous renditions of Berg's Violin Concerto, Ty Murray.
Yeah, there, and the bear. Oh, of course, the bear.
I put that in there.
No, I agree. And yes, and the Berg should be heard. Much more program. The Berg and the Szymanowski Violin Concerto, particularly Szymanowski. It's crazy why people aren't programming that. But the point is that that music has the capacity to speak universally, cross-culturally, and intergenerationally, and obviously cross-racially, and that there are proponents of different races who are not allowed or who are boxed in, who should be allowed and must be allowed. And I'm hopeful in this moment that we will see more of that. And on that note, I'm going to go hopefully to our last musical selection, a brilliant performance of yours, and one that has its level of controversy. I'm understanding as I was reading, this is coming from YouTube, I was reading about the different performance ideas and the metronome ideas, and then there's a recreation based on the Beethoven metronome. But your Hammerklavier, the final movement, which is, what is that, Sonata, the 29th Sonata, is a showpiece of extraordinary technique. It is just stunning. I mean, it is brilliant. And it is for every reason why you, Stewart Goodyear, should be considered and booked by numerous artistic administrators to do celebrity recitals of Beethoven, which is what you are excel in. I mean, there is no reason why it should be only whoever else, and I won't name a name, but I think you know where I'm going. So let us go to this, and then we will close out. This should begin on its own. Here it goes. Bravo,
Thank you.
bravo, bravo. That is just incredible, Stewart. The technique and the precision and the vision for that work, from my opinion, I mean, it's that by itself is a calling card. I mean, what would I say? There are many you have many calling cards, but anyone uh, that would hear that would understand that here is a brilliant pianist, a gifted pianist, and for someone to play that monumental work of incredible difficulty with that kind of poise and technique is just extraordinary. I'm going to say from Frances, my mother, from my father, John, from my grandmother, who was a church pianist at her church in Philadelphia for like 3 decades, from all of our family to you, bravo.
Thank you.
Absolutely bravo. Really. No, I mean, what did it take to do that? Just, share with us that.
So the Hammerklavier, I learned that sonata when I was 15, and it
Amazing.
was an ongoing quest to get that piece right. I was I was playing it for different teachers who swore that the metronome markings were ridiculous, that they made absolutely no sense. And I think that was also just due to past performances that just ignored the metronome markings and treated this piece as the Mount Everest of sonatas and played it as such. Every gesture was very heavy. There was a heaviness that went through all the movements. And I think to myself, I don't know. There's something toward those metronome markings. I need to solve this. I need to solve this mystery. And just going, just separating, myself from this idea that this is one of the most difficult concertos, the longest difficult concertos, difficult sonatas, the longest sonata with the longest, one of the longest slow movements ever written. Just to get that out of the way and just look at the sonata as a whole. What is the arch? What does the arch do? Its storytelling. There is a story behind it, and what makes this such a masterpiece. And just going through the metronome markings and thinking, well, especially around this time in Beethoven's life, we see this composer being very much inspired by the Baroque and Rococo period, with the Sarabande movement of Opus 109, and just the Baroque gestures, the embellishments, and everything. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, if I was going to look at this as a homage to the Baroque, at the same time, something that was so revolutionary and seeing to the future and inspiring 20th century composers, how would I look at it? So I'm thinking, all right, if the first movement is a homage to a Baroque overture, if I was paying, if I was paying respects to Handel and Vivaldi, then the second movement is like a 2-minute scherzo filled with humor and slapstick. The third is your ultimate pouring out of every emotion possible. And the reason why it's long is Beethoven needed that amount of time to just say what he wanted to say. Just to share with the listener or to whoever was reading the score, the deepest thoughts, the deepest pain, the deepest, trial from, whatever Beethoven was going through, to what is that cleansing, that spiritual cleansing that happens in the introduction to that sense of defiant victory that happens at the very end.
Right.
And from that standpoint, to me, the metronome markings finally made sense. And then how to make this metronome marking clear in the fourth movement. That's why I decided to do a Baroque trill as opposed to your regular romantic trill. So that's how I came up with that choice.
Interesting. No, that's just, but the performance is, irrespective of, the controversy about the meter, and I saw in this on YouTube all the different remarks about, from all of the purists, the people who prefer this performance, all that. Still, I think it comes across quite correctly and certainly passionately. I mean, as I've said this multiple times, and I'll finish saying it. This will be the last time you hear it. But, attending all 3 cycles of the Ivo Pogorelich piano competition, the first one in the 90s, I heard this piece, of course. And your performance, I mean, you get first prize for me, from my point of view. You, in the third cycle, there's absolutely no question. I mean, my God, it's just an achievement, an accomplishment, I mean, I love it. And I am so grateful. Do you want to have anything else to share? Because I think we're coming to the end.
Oh, that's a shame. Time really flew. I really enjoyed this very much.
Well, we can continue to talk, but I'm just thinking it's a little bit late. You're absolutely welcome. And I will say this much to you. This is only part 1. We'll come back because I definitely want to talk about your Ravel. I'm going to tell you this on that note. It was first when I was, is it possible? Was I 11 or 12? I think I was 12 when I first heard the Ludus by Hindemith. And then between 12 and 13, I heard Gaspard de la Nuit. And it was John Browning's recording, an RCA, an LP. And this is, I also worked in classical record stores as a teenager as a cellist, but this was an LP, I'm pretty sure. And then I think I also had, let's see, what is his name? Famous pianist in the 60s, and I'm Charles Rosen. Charles Rosen's recording of the Debussy on Epic, which was a division of Columbia. Yeah. So my first was, I think it was, I hope I'm getting this name right. It was a Finnish pianist who had her recording of the Hindemith Ludus, I think Kati Latere or something like that, Kabi Latere, mid 60s from Finland, and then came actually Charles Rosen's Debussy, and then the John Browning. Gaspard de la Nuit. I cannot. We have to talk more.
Oh, yes, I look forward to that.
Yeah, because I was the one who introduced these pianists to my mother, who was already the Horowitz person.
Yes.
I mean, what's funny about that is that she was already beyond Horowitz. She was the one who was telling me about Jorge Bolet, who I had not known about, but she was very much in, as you can hear, very much into it. And of course, um, before she passed, I had the great fortune twice. Once there was a sold out concert recital of Evgeny Kissin's.
Mhm.
It was showcasing his Chopin CD, new one at that time. I actually bought it and got it autographed and gave it to her as a gift. And then I think there was a second recital of Kissin that I couldn't attend, but I gave her the ticket too. So I think you get it, big time piano people. And It's just been a joy, truly. And may this just be the end of part one, and we will continue with part two, because I certainly want to and hear your thoughts and remembrances about your teacher, Liam Fleischer, who passed away earlier this year, and who's got quite the history with the Beethoven Concerti. And then I had never had a chance to see him live, but I was at another piano event, a Rachmaninoff piano event in Pasadena, where Byron Janis was one of the jurors, along with Vladimir Ashkenazy. Of course, I wasn't able to get backstage to meet either of them, but of course, I grew up with as well with Byron Janis, very famously through his Mercury Living Presence recording. So, yep, we got a lot to talk about. So,
Yeah,
this
looking
has
forward.
been wonderful. Thank you so very much for this great opportunity. Congratulations on becoming today an honorary fellow of the
Thank you.
Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, Canada, and may that inspire all of those people, all of your peers who graduated today virtually, to believe in the possibilities, and for you to be, if you will, a beacon of light for them, a beacon of a light of inspiration. So, with that note, we go forward and to the next time.
The next
And
time.
much luck on everything that's coming up this week and next.
Thank you very
Definitely.
much.
You're very welcome. Okay. All right. We'll see you. Bye for now.